How are you feeling about the Los Angeles Chargers draft? Based on this poll I ran, sounds like you like the first pick at least. What about the rest? Let's go through it, pick by pick, and assign a grade. And then give the whole draft a grade. How's that sound? Okay, great. Before we do all that, please subscribe. I'm, as of this recording, 24 away from 1,000, which means you're 24 subscribers away from no more lame pizza jokes. Alright, so let's start with Joe Alt. I've done a whole video going into detail about Alt, but there are still a few points I didn't make in the last one. Overall, I definitely still like the pick a lot. And yeah, the transition to right tackle is going to be interesting to watch, but he's athletic enough to do it. And the bloodlines are great. He just seems to know football. I don't think it's going to be an issue. But most importantly, what I do want to get across is, despite the fact that I personally would have picked a wide receiver in that spot, it doesn't mean that I don't like Joe Alt. For whatever reason, Chargers Twitter is being very black and white about this. But ultimately, this was about picking between two good prospects. I don't think they could have gone wrong really with either way. So considering that, I'll give this pick an A-. Next up is Lad McConkey. And first, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I made a YouTube short that I posted like 30 minutes after the pick, and I was being too glib about it, I think, and I decided to take it down. I think bringing up the old Chargers joke about everyone getting injured was a little lame, which I'll admit, but I do stand by the fact that he might struggle to stay healthy in the NFL, and that's because of his frame, and it's not just me. This is what the scouts are saying. To quote Dane Brugler's Beast Guide, unimposing body type with lean bulk that is likely maxed out. NFL scouts say adding weight has been a challenge for him in the past. That said, I never said he was bad, and I really emphasized that, but for some reason people were still saying I said that, but he definitely is good, and I think he could be a very productive player, and if Ben Herbert can do what the people at Georgia did, who, yeah, I mean, this is Georgia we're talking about. It's not like he came from Georgia Southern, right? Like, came from a pretty good program. If he can get some more muscle mass on him, that's great. Let's not pretend like he doesn't have question marks coming in, because it's just that's the reality. Still, overall, I like the pick a lot because, hey, finally the Chargers got a wide receiver who's fast, who's under 4.4 for Herbert. Of course, it's only a 4.39, but still, under 4.4. If he can stay healthy, he's going to be a menace. So overall, I give this one a B+. Like, I just want to emphasize, he's good, but I have to bump it down a bit because they did have to give up something to get him, which was switching a 4th and a 5th pick. There were still other receivers who were also pretty fast left on the board, so I don't think it was 100% necessary, but I get where they're coming from because they like their guy, so I'm not dinging them too much, obviously. Next up, we have Junior Coulson, who they took in the 3rd round, and I gotta say I love this pick. He's obviously a high-character guy with a great backstory, going from a Haitian orphanage all the way to Michigan and then now the Los Angeles Chargers. He's the kind of guy who commands a team, and he also calls the plays. Defensive coordinator Jesse Minter obviously knows him, so it's going to be really smooth. And I think the kind of linebacker that Junior Coulson can be is still very underrated in the draft these days. The Niners sure don't regret taking Fred Warner in the 3rd round. Fred Warner actually went 70th, and Junior Coulson went 69th. Obviously, I'm not saying he's going to be as good as Warner, but anyone out there who is frustrated they took a linebacker this high, I'd advise you not to be. There's a better than good chance he's going to be a solid starter who can develop into a Pro Bowler. And most importantly, I think Jesse Minter's defense definitely needs active linebackers. So I have to give this pick an A. I know a lot of people were hoping for Blake Corum there, but I think that would have not been a prudent pick considering his mileage, and I'm glad it was Colson. Next up, we have Justin Eboigbe. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, but he's a defensive end, defensive tackle hybrid out of Alabama. Really like this pick a lot overall. I think the Chargers obviously need a lot of help on the defensive line, and I think having a guy who's a bit of a tweener makes sense here, especially one with like as much of a motor he has, and his production was pretty decent, 7 sacks in last season. And PFF gave him an over 80 in terms of run grade. So he's not your classic run-stuffing nose tackle, but he's not going to kill you in that regard like a lot of these pass-rushing guys do. I think that bodes well for the Chargers building a hellacious front, which I'm all for. Next up, we have Tarheen Still, a slot corner out of Maryland. I saw a lot of pushback against this one on Twitter, and it's likely because his speed wasn't impressive, and that he might have been a bit of a reach. But this was a case of them getting one of their guys, and by that I mean someone who fits the Jesse Minter defense. The Minter defense likes to do a lot of switching between zone and man, which Still apparently is pretty comfortable with. He's not as good in press, but he can hang. And where he lacks in speed, his ability to stick with receivers is really good. And I understand why they opted for someone with versatility, considering the defense they run. Not to mention they had a pressing need at slot corner, and he fills it. If you're getting a player who might be a starter/rotation guy in the 4th round, you're doing pretty okay. So I'll give this pick a B. It's not much of a home run pick, but I think it'll be a solid single, maybe double for the team. And at this point, it's not the worst idea, especially since, later on in the draft to take more chances. More interestingly, it sure sounds like Tarvarus Taylor is going to be more of a special teams guy next year. Just a hunch. With their 2nd, 5th rounder, the Chargers take Cam Hart, a corner out of Notre Dame. First, I want to point out that I did have the Chargers taking Cam Hart in my most recent mock draft. and I gotta say I really like the pick. And I didn't have them taking the same slot corner, but I think basically the idea was the same, that they start off taking a guy who could be a potential starter for them higher up, and then take a developmental guy after that, someone who could possibly play outside for them pretty soon. And as far as developmental guys go, Hart is as good as it gets. At 6'3", over 200 pounds, a solid 40 time, as well as good arm length, he checks all the boxes. Tape-wise, he doesn't. He still has a lot to work on, and his ball skills are kind of suspect. But there's a lot to dream on, especially with the success of bigger type of corners who've been dropping in the draft the last few years, like Tariq Woolen. So overall, I gotta give this pick an A. I think, especially too, I like the idea of double dipping here, getting a corner who you can develop to potentially replace Christian Fulton if you start struggling mid-season. And since you have a slot corner, you don't have to be rushing guys out of position or anything like that. Next up, we've got Kamani Vidal, a running back out of Troy. I like this pick a lot. I mean, this late in the draft, to pick up a guy who was as productive in college as he was is pretty great. Obviously, his question mark is his size, and not pounds-wise, because he's over 200 at 213, which is great for running back, especially considering his 4.46 in the 40. But the problem is he's a shade under 5'8". That's not ideal, especially considering the workload. But then again, I mean, the Chargers have had a pretty good history with undersized running backs. Scouts seem to think that he's not particularly great at creating, but he'll take what you give him. But I don't see that being a problem in a Greg Roman offense. There will be wide open lanes, so a guy like Kamani Vidal with his speed, he could definitely take advantage of that. I can definitely see him contributing, and considering the round they got him in, it was a pretty solid pick. I'd have to give this one an A-. Next up, the Chargers take Brenden Rice, the son of Jerry Rice. He's a wide receiver out of USC. He was once considered to be a fringe second, third rounder kind of type, but slid once his measurables weren't really great. Funny enough, neither were his dads, who, Jerry Rice, he was pretty good, I think. But still, I think the apple fell maybe not far from the tree, but not as close as, say, like Marvin Harrison Jr. But that said, I still think he has something to contribute. I think he's a tough player who can get the ball in contested situations, and he's proven himself as a good run blocker. Not to mention, he had a pretty good production when he came in touchdowns in college. As far as 7th round picks go, you can definitely do way worse, so I give this one A-. With their last pick, the Chargers take Cornelius Johnson, another wide receiver, out of Michigan. A part of me thinks this is a subtle troll, considering how much chatter there was about wide receivers in the upcoming draft, and then they can now say they took 3. Of course, 2 of those 3 are in the 7th round, but still, I appreciate them solidifying the bottom of the roster, considering they're going to need that depth. Cornelius Johnson's kind of an interesting prospect. He's tall, but his arm length is just average. His hand size is actually below average. Doesn't have much height, but he pretty much comes down with every contested catch, which is very impressive considering that. I think Daniel Jeremiah called him a potential Mike Williams replacement, but I think he was being generous, and I think if that happens, it would have to be after years of refinement. But still, I think considering Jim Harbaugh is willing to take him, he's probably got the work ethic to work out at least at special teams. So I'll give this pick a C. I would have preferred more of a swinging for the fences pick here, but it wasn't the worst pick by any means. I think overall, I'd have to give this draft an A-. I think in particular, I was really impressed with the job they did on day 3, and it was a breath of fresh air compared to what we saw with Tom Telesco. There were no just egregious missteps, just solid pick after solid pick on day 3. And day 1 and day 2 were also pretty great. Also, funny enough, they only took 1 offensive lineman. So are all you Trench guys mad at them now? Let me know in the comments. Also, make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks again for watching.